Welcome to the deep dive. For as long as humans have gazed at the stars or build monuments, there's this one question that's just echoed through every culture, every era. What happens after we die?
It really is universal, isn't it? This deep, profound mystery.
Exactly. And it creates this constant tension. You've got the materialist views, right? Suggesting consciousness just stops, poof, gone with the body.
The brain shuts down, awareness ends. That's the standard line, often.
But then you have just countless personal stories, anecdotal reports, even some empirical studies hinting that maybe there's something more.
Yeah, experiences that don't quite fit that neat picture.
So today, we're trying to move beyond just a belief. We're diving into an academic reflection, actually, that tries to bring a scientific lens to this mystery, using some, frankly, extraordinary cases as a starting point.
And it's fascinating how researchers are trying to tackle this scientifically.
Right. So our goal for you, the listener, is to explore how scholars, clinicians, researchers are pushing this discussion, taking it into this realm of real philosophical, scientific, psychological challenge. We want to give you a clear path through this pretty complex interdisciplinary debate.
Sort of a shortcut to understanding the current thinking.
Exactly. And we'll be guided mainly by a paper called Life After Death, an academic reflection on the Scole Experiment in Contemporary Evidence by Jared N. Smith.
A very useful framework for this discussion.
Definitely. So first things first, let's get a couple of key ideas straight. We all kind of know what death means, but, academically, the APA, the American Psychological Association, defines it pretty starkly. The irreversible cessation of all functions of the entire brain, including the brainstem.
Clinical finality, basically.
Right. And consciousness. That's our subjective awareness. The APA calls it the quality or state of being aware of an external object or something within oneself.
Or inner experience, essentially.
Yeah. And the huge question for us today is what happens to that awareness, that identity, maybe even spirit after physical death? Especially when, let's face it, modern science mostly sees consciousness as just brain activity, a byproduct.
Generated solely by the physical brain.
But what if it isn't? What if consciousness has, a non-local basis, meaning it's not just stuck inside your skull. Maybe it operates beyond the brain, perhaps like a field or something.
That's where things get really interesting, controversial, obviously.
Totally. Because then you look at phenomena like veridical near-death experiences. People clinically dead reporting things they saw or heard that turned out to be true, things they couldn't possibly have known.
Like details from the operating room or events happening miles away.
Exactly. Or evidential mediumship mediums providing incredibly specific, accurate info about deceased people, details they seemingly couldn't have guessed or researched.
Names, dates, very specific memories.
And then there's the whole area of kids spontaneously recalling past life memories, sometimes with details that can actually be checked out.
Those cases are often quite startling.
They really are. And look, these things aren't easy to just brush aside. This is where parapsychology comes in. It's a branch of psychology and physics, too, systematically looking into phenomena that seem to, break the standard rules of science.
Challenging those orthodox assumptions.
Now, I know it's often seen as fringe, but this field is gaining some credibility through rigorous peer-reviewed work. You've got researchers like Charles Tart, Ian Stevenson, Dean Radin, and especially David Fontana. His work really digs into these survivalist hypotheses.
And that's precisely where the real depth of this deep dive lies, isn't it? Because if consciousness isn't solely a brain function, like the materialist view suggests,
Right.
then how do we begin to explain these compelling phenomena you just mentioned? The ones that seem to happen outside the physical brain, or even without a functioning one.
It forces you to ask big questions.
Absolutely. This discussion pushes us to ask if our current scientific models are really, comprehensive enough. Are they capturing the whole picture of reality? That tension between the standard definitions and these unexplained experiences, that's what makes exploring this so vital.
Okay, so with those big ideas floating around, let's zoom in on one specific and truly remarkable attempt to investigate this stuff scientifically. The Scole Experiment.
Ah, yes, Scole. A fascinating case.
It really is. Took place between 1993 and 1998. Imagine this tiny cellar in Scole, Norfolk, England. For 5 years, this group held over 500 sessions or sittings focused on repeated observation, careful documentation.
Quite a sustained effort.
Yeah. The main people involved were Robin and Sandra Foy, researchers with a spiritualist background, and two mediums, Alan and Diana Bennett.
And what made Scole different was its focus on physical mediumship, rather.
Exactly. Unlike mental mediums who mostly relay messages, physical mediums supposedly facilitate tangible physical effects, things you can see, hear, even touch.
So we're talking about objects moving on their own.
Yep. Strange sounds, lights appearing even, materializations, objects appearing seemingly out of thin air.
Wow.
And the mediums had this really intriguing claim. They said they were working with a spirit team.
A spirit team.
Yeah, supposedly disincarnate scientists and technicians from another dimension, or a parallel one, and their goal, according to the mediums, was to prove the afterlife by manipulating energy, kind of bridging the gap between their dimension and ours.
That is quite a claim, as you said.
Bold. Oh, extremely bold.
Yeah.
But what really makes Scole stand out are the reported phenomena, just astounding stuff, apparently witnessed consistently over hundreds of sessions.
Okay, like what specifically?
All right, get this. Observers reported seeing small balls of light, sometimes called spirit lights, that moved around the room as if they had intelligence.
Moving with purpose, not just randomly.
Exactly. Then materializations, or apports. Objects like flowers, stones, old coins, newspapers from the future, apparently, and even, on one occasion, a live butterfly just appeared in the sealed room.
A live butterfly in a sealed cellar.
That's the report. Then there were audio phenomena, independent voices, sometimes speaking in languages nobody present knew, not coming from any of the sitters.
Disembodied voices.
And this one blows my mind, the film phenomena. They take brand new rolls of photographic film, still sealed, lock them in containers in the room. Later, when developed, these films showed images, symbols, text stuff that absolutely wasn't there before.
On sealed film. How?
That's the million-dollar question. Sometimes in unknown languages, sometimes portraits, and this was done with minimal handling, sometimes even using film brought by outside observers.
So trying to rule out fraud, basically.
You'd think so. Plus, sitters reported being touched by unseen hands, feeling breezes, and experiencing sudden, measurable drops in temperature in parts of the room.
A whole range of physical effects.
A whole range. And look, these weren't just casual observations. Senior members of the Society for Psychical Research people like Montague Keen, David Fontana, Arthur Ellison, with serious backgrounds in physics, engineering, psychology, they observed these sittings.
Respected investigator.
Right. And they concluded that many of these events just couldn't be explained by normal means, by fraud or illusion. Fontana himself called Scole the most convincing case for survival evidence I've encountered.
That's a pretty strong statement from someone like Fontana.
It really is.
But, it raises that tough question again. If the evidence seems so compelling to these experienced investigators, why did Scole, shake up mainstream science more? What were the main criticisms leveled against it?
That's fair. What were the sticking points?
Well, the methodological ambition of Scole was undeniable. The sheer volume of sessions, the documentation being open to observers, that really does set it apart.
Mm-hmm.
However, it definitely didn't meet standard laboratory conditions. There wasn't, say, strict blind testing protocols as you'd expect in a controlled lab experiment. The mediums weren't physically restrained, which is often a requirement in historical physical mediumship research to prevent trickery.
Right, that's a common critique. The darkness, too, right? Many phenomena happened in low light or darkness.
Exactly. Darkness dependency is always a red flag for skeptics, suggesting potential for fraud. And then there's the issue of replication. Other groups trying to replicate the specific Scole effects haven't had the same reported success.
Okay, so lack of conventional controls, darkness, replication issues, those sound like significant hurdles.
They are, from a conventional scientific standpoint. But this also raises a really important counter question. Can we actually expect phenomena that might depend on subtle factors like intention, group dynamics, maybe even consciousness itself, to behave like simple physical systems in a sterile lab?
Good point. Like trying to measure a feeling with a ruler.
Kind of. Researchers like Stephen Broad argue that just dismissing these events because they lack conventional repeatability might miss the point. It might show a misunderstanding of the nature of the phenomena. Maybe they're conditional, psi-conducive, needing specific, perhaps delicate conditions to occur.
So the Scole group themselves argued against restraints, didn't they? Saying it might block the very energies needed.
They did. They contended that the conditions, including the trust and harmony within the group, were part of what enabled the phenomena, and that imposing strict controls might actually inhibit them. It's a real methodological dilemma for this kind of research.
It really highlights the clash between trying to study potentially consciousness-related phenomena with tools designed for purely physical systems.
Precisely.
But okay, Scole, while fascinating, isn't totally unique in its implications. If we zoom out again and connect it to the bigger picture, you see it fits within this broader landscape of evidence that hints consciousness might not be permanently tethered to the brain.
Right. There are other lines of inquiry pointing in similar directions.
Definitely. Think about near-death experiences, NDEs. We touched on them earlier. These are experiences people report when they're near physical death, often during cardiac arrest. Raymond Moody's early work, Life After Life, outlined those common themes: leaving the body, the tunnel of light, meeting beings.
That really brought NDEs into public awareness.
It did. But the really compelling part scientifically comes from studies like Dr. Pim van Lommel's, published in The Lancet, no less. He studied cardiac arrest survivors, found 18% reported NDEs. And, crucially, some of them described verifiable perceptions of their surroundings while they had clinically flat EEGs.
Meaning no measurable brain activity.
Exactly. Imagine someone accurately describing, say, a specific nurse's actions or a piece of equipment in the room while their brain waves are flatlined, later confirmed by staff.
That directly challenges the idea that it's just the brain short-circuiting, like anoxia or hallucination.
It really does. Those veridical perceptions are hard to explain away easily. Then you have veridical mental mediumship.
Where mediums provide accurate information, supposedly from the deceased.
Right, and Dr. Julie Beichel's work at the Winbridge Research Center is pretty remarkable here. They use these incredibly strict protocols like quintuple blind.
Quintuple blind. That's intense.
It means almost no one involved knows who the medium is trying to contact or what the specifics are, minimizing any chance of clues or fraud. And under these conditions, they've shown mediums providing surprisingly accurate, specific, meaningful details about deceased individuals, details unknown to them.
Specific names, causes of death, unique personality traits.
Stuff that seems way beyond guesswork or cold reading.
Yeah, the level of detail in some cases is impressive.
And we can't forget the reincarnation research. Dr. Ian Stevenson dedicated decades, literally 4 decades, to investigating children, usually very young, who claimed to remember past lives. Over 2,500 cases documented globally.
Stevenson's work is pretty legendary in this field.
It is. He meticulously documented cases where kids recalled names, places, events from a supposed past life that were later verified through records or witness testimony.
And often in cultures without a strong belief in reincarnation, which makes it even more intriguing.
Right, and sometimes these kids had birthmarks or physical traits that corresponded uncannily to injuries or marks on the deceased person they claimed to have been.
Like a birthmark matching a fatal wound described by the child.
Exactly. Really specific, often medically documented correspondences.
Compelling, though still debated, of course.
Of course. And finally, maybe on the more theoretical edge, you have quantum theories of consciousness. This is more speculative, but it's being discussed more seriously.
Like Hameroff and Penrose's Orchor model.
Precisely. The idea that consciousness might actually stem from quantum processes happening deep inside our neurons, not just classical computation, but something more fundamental, maybe even non-local, potentially independent of the physical brain structure itself.
So if consciousness is a fundamental property of the universe, tied into quantum mechanics,
then maybe it's not something that's just created by the brain and destroyed at death. Maybe it just reorganizes or persists in some way. It's a wild thought, but it echoes that Scole idea of spirit scientists manipulating energy across dimensions, doesn't it?
it does resonate. And what's truly fascinating here, I think, is how these different areas seem to converge, thematically at least. You've got Salal's physical phenomena, NDEs subjective experiences during clinical death, mediumship's informational transfer, reincarnation's continuity of identity.
Different methods, different angles.
Exactly. Their methodologies are worlds apart in some ways. But that recurring theme keeps popping up. Conscious awareness seemingly operating independently of a fully functioning, or sometimes any functioning, physical brain.
So it pushes beyond just asking, is there an afterlife?
I think so. It forces us to fundamentally rethink the relationship between mind and brain, maybe even the nature of consciousness itself. What is it? Where is it? How does it interact with the physical world? These become the really critical questions.
It's not just seeking proof, but maybe adjusting the scientific framework.
Right. It's less about a simple yes-no and more about, okay, if this data is real, what kind of reality does it imply? And how do we need to adapt our scientific tools and concepts to even investigate it properly? Each area, Scole, NDEs, mediumship, reincarnation, gives us a piece of a very complex puzzle. None is the whole picture. Skole's contribution is that really unique focus on tangible, objective physical effects.
Which brings us to the philosophical side.
Yeah.
Because, okay, if we entertain this possibility of survival, what does that actually mean? It's not just data points. It's a massive challenge to how we understand ourselves and reality.
Absolutely. What part of you survives?
Exactly. What is personal identity? Is it just your memories? Is it some kind of disembodied awareness? Like in religious traditions, philosophers have wrestled with this for ages, Cartesian dualism, mind versus body.
Versus physicalism, where mind is just brain states.
Right. And David Chalmers talks about the hard problem of consciousness, basically. How does physical stuff, like neurons firing, give rise to subjective experience, to the feeling of being me?
The qualitative aspect, the what it's like part.
Yeah. Chalmers suggests maybe consciousness isn't reducible to physics as we know it. Maybe it's fundamental. And if it is fundamental,
Then its destruction at death isn't necessarily a given. Persistence becomes at least conceivable.
it does. And this aligns more with idealist philosophies, the idea that mind or consciousness is primary and matter arises from it, which, interestingly, resonates with that Scole narrative of active, intelligent spirit teams operating without physical bodies. That demands a pretty radical shift from standard neuroscience.
Oh, completely. Because if we really connect this back to the dominant view in neuroscience, consciousness stops when the brain stops, that view starts to look, well, maybe incomplete when you're faced with all this persistent anomalous data we've been discussing.
It feels like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole sometimes.
It can. And thinkers like Dean Radin, in his book Entangled Minds, explore ideas drawing from quantum physics, suggesting consciousness might function like quantum fields, having non-local properties, like an interconnected web of information potentially extending beyond space and time.
So if consciousness is non-local,
Then its absolute dependence on the physical brain is weakened, isn't it? Postmortem persistence becomes, at least theoretically, more plausible within such a framework.
but for many scientists, these are still just anomalies, right? Outliers. What's the strongest counter-argument they'd raise against this whole body of evidence?
That's a crucial question to keep in mind. The strongest argument usually boils down to methodology and replicability, as we touched on with Scole.
Right. Can these results be consistently replicated under tightly controlled laboratory conditions?
Exactly. Conventional science relies heavily on that. If an effect can't be reliably produced on demand in different labs by different researchers, skepticism is the default and often justified response. Many of these phenomena, mediumship, physical effects at Scole, even the consistency of NDE reports under scrutiny, struggle to meet that gold standard of replicability.
So it highlights that core tension again. Are we dealing with phenomena that are just inherently elusive or require specific, hard-to-replicate conditions? Or is the evidence itself flawed or misinterpreted?
Precisely. And this is where Thomas Kuhn's ideas about scientific revolutions become relevant. Kuhn pointed out that science doesn't always progress smoothly. Dominant paradigms, like materialism in this case, resist anomalous data. Evidence that doesn't fit the accepted model is often ignored, dismissed, or explained away.
Until the anomalies pile up so much you can't ignore them anymore.
Right. Until the pressure forces a paradigm shift. So the resistance to survival phenomena might not just be about a lack of evidence, but also about the profound challenge this evidence poses to the established scientific worldview. It's a threat to the framework itself.
There's a sociology to science, not just pure data.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Consensus plays a huge role, which is why the insistence on classical reproducibility, while vital for much of science, might need some flexibility, perhaps, or adaptation, especially when investigating phenomena potentially linked to consciousness, which seem inherently sensitive, variable, and context-dependent.
So maybe we need different tools or approaches.
That's the argument. This leads to the growing call for what's sometimes termed a post-materialist science. It's not about throwing materialism out entirely. It works incredibly well for much of reality.
Sure.
But it's about recognizing its potential limitations, especially regarding consciousness, mind, and perhaps these deeper aspects of reality. Exploring a model where mind and matter aren't strictly separate, but maybe aspects of a deeper, unified reality, where consciousness could be fundamental.
So wrapping this up, what we've explored today, from those bizarre lights and objects at Scole, to people seeing things accurately while clinically dead, to kids remembering verifiable past lives, It's not about handing you definitive proof of an afterlife.
Not at all. The evidence is complex, contested.
Exactly. It's more about acknowledging this growing body of evidence, flawed or incomplete, as parts of it might be, that seriously challenges our basic assumptions about life, death, and what consciousness even is.
The methodological issues are real. Skepticism is healthy.
Definitely. But like David Fontana argued, the proper scientific response to phenomena that don't fit our models isn't just denial, it's investigation. Careful, critical investigation.
Finding ways to study it rigorously, even if it's difficult.
And for you, the listener, thinking about this stuff, it really does open up some profound personal questions, doesn't it? If survival is even just plausible, how might that change how we view grief? Or end-of-life care? Or even mental health?
It offers potential frameworks for meaning, doesn't it? Beyond just a purely nihilistic view. It might help validate some complex human experiences that are sometimes dismissed or pathologized.
It invites us to consider perspectives that might offer comfort or maybe a broader sense of connection, perhaps?
Exactly. The Scole Experiment, NDEs, all this stuff, they aren't really giving us neat final answers. Think of them more as an invitation.
An invitation, too.
To rethink our assumptions. To explore the boundaries of what we think is possible. To seriously consider that consciousness might not just switch off at the moment of physical death. The real challenge moving forward isn't whether we should investigate these mysteries, it's how. How can we do it best? With rigor, yes, but also with respect for the experiences and, crucially, with a genuine willingness to embrace complexity, maybe even to expand the boundaries of what science itself is willing to consider real.